On this episode of Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, join me as I discuss the Father's Day outing that ended in murder. The Father's Day killer starting right after this. Hi everyone and welcome to Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans. I am your host Belinda Brady and welcome guys. Welcome to my little podcast and thank you so much for listening to me. You have no idea how much I appreciate it. Now, a real quick welcome to some listeners who are joining me from Auckland, from Missouri, from Texas, from Kansas, from Tassie, from WA, from Victoria and Sydney. Welcome guys and thank you for listening. Now, as I've said in previous episodes, I am now offering a subscription service. So if you do want to subscribe, if you want to hear how wonderfully haunted Australia is and dive into some ghost stories with me, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, which is available on my Buzzsprout website. And as always, let's cut to what I'm drinking. I am drinking a 7-Eleven coffee. It is freezing cold here in my part of Australia. We are well into the thick of winter. I hate it. I am cold, so I need a coffee, and I don't mind the 7-Eleven coffees every now and then. And whatever you're up to, if you are driving, gymming, getting settled in to have a sleep, or if this is your podcast listening time, thank you for choosing me, and let's dive right into it. Now, I will go into the sources. Sources are dailymail.co.uk, theage.com.au, smh.com.au, theguardian.com, issuu.com, Police Life, abc.net.au, and Yahoo and findagrave.com.au. Now, I will give you a trigger warning for this one, guys. This one does discuss the murder of young children. If this is distressing to you, listener discretion is advised. Marriages break up every day for a variety of reasons. It's a fact, and it's a horrible fact, yes, but it does happen. And when a marriage ends, most of these separations and divorces have a lot of high emotions involved. I mean, you spent a good chunk of your life with someone you once loved and thought you'd be with forever, and now you're fighting it out over the smallest of things. It's a tough part of life, and I am yet to come across a divorce, a marriage separation that was amicable and friendly, especially when there are kids involved. Some use their kids as a pawn, and some use them as a way to punish their ex for ending it. And this is the case with Robert Farquharson. Now, when Robert married Cindy Gambino in August 2000, they had been together for 6 years, and they'd already had their 2 boys, Jai and Tyler. Now, on the outside, they looked like a pretty happy couple. Robert was a hard worker. Cindy adored her boys and loved nothing more than being a stay-at-home mother. And on the surface, things looked great. But on their wedding day, and even though it was a lovely wedding day, underneath her smile, Cindy was already having her doubts. Robert was, like I said, hard worker and pleasant, but things weren't great between the two. Robert had a bit of a nasty side to him. And when Robert's mother died from cancer in 2002, just before the couple's third son, Bailey, was born, Robert became moody and unpredictable. Now, Cindy believed Robert was depressed, but he refused to even acknowledge it, let alone address it. Behind closed doors, he would harass Cindy relentlessly and tease their eldest son, Jai, just as relentlessly. And after months of bullying and abuse, Cindy told Robert she'd had enough and that the marriage was over. She left the family home in November 2004, and within days she had filed for divorce and quickly changed her surname back to her maiden name. Now, by Father's Day, September 2005, Australia, we have Father's Day in September. I know other places have it in May. But by Father's Day 2005, Cindy was flourishing. She had been separated from Robert for 10 months, and she was the happiest she had been in a long time. And she had begun to see a man she had met when her and Robert had begun building their home in Winchelsea, Victoria, which is where they both lived. It was a house that she no longer wanted, and it was on the market, but it was struggling to sell. And she had met Stephen Moyles, and I hope I've said his last name correctly, when he came to the couple's property to pour a slab for the house, the foundation of the house they were building, her and Robert were building at the time. And their friendship had bloomed since Cindy and Robert had separated. Now, Stephen had just been through a bitter divorce separation himself and was not overly keen to be with a woman who was in the midst of one, but they agreed to take it slow and see where this new friendship would lead them. Meanwhile, Robert was miserable. He was living with his dad and was still very bitter about the separation, telling anyone who'd listened that all he got from the marriage was a shit car, and whinging about the rising childcare costs for his boys, complaining he'd never get ahead while he had to pay maintenance for his kids. Now, when Cindy touched base with Robert before Father's Day of 2005 and listened emphatically to Robert tell her he'd been sick with the flu all week, she was sympathetic, telling him, you know, you've been working long hours, you're probably just a bit run down, and this was his invitation to complain yet again and even more about how long the house was taking to sell, how shit the car he had was, how broke he was, etc., etc. Cindy sympathised with him. She suggested he maybe look for a cheaper place to live, and she even went as far to say, how about you forget about any child support payments for the meantime if that helped you get back on your feet. At this point, he even said he was thinking of moving to Queensland to stay with his brother, but Cindy told him, you can't do that, you can't leave your kids. Now, Cindy knew his depression was bad, but the hopelessness in which he spoke to her had her really worried. So Cindy suggested that he could see his boys on Father's Day after 3 p.m. as he'd been rostered to work that day, to which Robert readily agreed. Now, Father's Day rolled around, and as promised, Cindy loaded up her 3 young sons in her car to take them to see their dad. As she drove, she was interrupted by Jai, who was in the back seat, who cried, "Mum, I've forgotten the present I bought Dad from the Father's Day store." Now, Father's Day stores are little stores we have at schools here in Australia. We have them for both Mother's Day and Father's Day, where the kids can go and pick out a little cute present for their parents. It's sweet. It's really sweet. He'd left the back scratcher he'd picked out for his dad at home and was upset about it because he really wanted to give it to his dad, but they were too far from home at that point. And Cindy reassured Jai that they can give it to their dad another time, and he had plenty of presents from the boys for his special day. Robert was already home and waiting for his boys when Cindy arrived to his house, and Jai and Tyler ran to Robert, watching with excitement as he opened their gifts for him. Now, little Bailey, who was 2, hung back, clinging to his mum, wanting to go back with her when she left. He even followed her, crying, "Me too, Mum," as he held out his little arms to be picked up. Now, Cindy reassured her younger son he'd be fine with his dad, and she hung around to see Robert open a framed photo of his boys, which nearly brought him to tears. Now, Cindy could tell he was down and suggested that the photo would look great in his new place when he gets one, and that he could have the boys for a bit longer if he wanted to. And she told him that the boys had asked if they could have dinner with their dad, and she agreed, saying he could drop them back to her place afterwards. She told Robert she had packed extra nappies, diapers in other parts of the world, and wipes and a sippy cup for little Bailey, and to bring them back by 7:30 so she could get them ready for bed. She said goodbye to her boys, hopped in her car and left, heading to Stephen's to spend some time with him. The boys talked Robert into getting them Kentucky Fried Chicken for dinner, and he drove them to a nearby suburb of Belmont to get it. Now, Cindy and Stephen had a coffee, they'd had a catch up, and she left his house in time to get home to meet Robert when he came to drop the boys off. At around the same time, Robert was driving towards her home The road he was on was a highway that rises to a rail overpass and then descends towards the outskirts of town. The road was dark and empty when Robert's car left the road, headed down a grassy embankment, crashed through a wire fence and plunged into a large freezing cold dam. This was at around 7:15 p.m, 15 minutes before the boys were due home. Locals Shane Atkinson and Tony McClelland were driving along the same road not too far behind Robert's car. They saw the car appear to swerve around something on the road and then disappear. When they got to the spot where the car had stopped, a man jumped out at them out of the darkness, making Shane, who was driving, slam on the brakes in shock. At first, he thought the man was in the middle of a suicide attempt and had thrown himself at his car trying to end his life. Shane and Tony quickly got out of the car and ran to where the man was, just as this man was running to meet them. The man was Robert Farquharson and he was soaking wet. Tony asked him, "What the fuck are you doing standing on the side of the road?" To which the man responded, "No, no, no." When asked what he meant, Robert responded with, "No, no, no, fuck, 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 what have I done?" Shane tried to calm him down, but it was fruitless. At this point, Robert said, "Give me a lift back to Winch," which is short for his suburb. "I've got to tell Cindy I've just killed the kids." He then asked the men, who were now looking at each other in utter disbelief at what they had just heard, for a cigarette, telling them he had put his car into the dam. Shane asked him which dam, and Robert didn't answer, just mumbled to himself and seemed to be struggling to breathe. He eventually told them that he had done a wheel bearing and had a coughing fit, which caused him to black out. When he woke, the car was in the freezing cold dam and he tried to get his kids out, but he couldn't. Shane walked to the paddock and looked for the dam, which was hard to see as it was pitch black and the water surface was smooth. And it was a moonless night, so there was no moon to help the boys find anything. Initially, he doubted this strange man's story and thought maybe he was in the middle of having a mental breakdown. Robert asked him again, "Take me back to Cindy's house. I've got to tell the missus that I've killed the kids." Shane refused, saying, "I'm not going anywhere if you've just killed your kids," and offered to call the police or ambulance, to which Robert refused. He just kept repeating over and over he wanted to go to Cindy's. Now, perplexed, Shane and Tony said they'll go to the dam and search, which was again met with resistance. And Robert yet again asking to be taken to Cindy's, telling the pair it's too late, they've already gone. Robert continued mumbling, and at this point, Shane grabbed his arm and noticed how wet he was, but still didn't know if what he was saying was true or if he was having a mental episode and had just attempted suicide. He got Robert into his car and gave him his phone, insisting he called an ambulance, which Robert again refused, again stating that he needed to get to Cindy's. So the men relented, because at this point they still didn't know what was fact or what was fiction. And on the drive back to Cindy's, Robert mumbled over and over, "What have I done? What have I done?" Shane sped to Cindy's house and slammed on the brakes in her driveway, screaming her name as she ran to her front door. Tony was still in the car with Robert when he heard him saying, "Cindy's going to kill me." Cindy burst out of her house in a panic, asking where her boys were, and Robert was at the doorstep waiting for her, wet and sobbing, waiting to tell her what exactly had happened. "I've killed the kids. They're in the water. I must have had a coughing fit and passed out. I woke up in the water. I couldn't get them out." Now, Shane watched Cindy turn pale as she absorbed what Robert was telling her, and then just scream hysterically, and she did not stop. It was at that moment that Shane said he knew he shouldn't have left the dam and he should have gone down to try and find these boys, going on to say, "I'd done the stupidest thing of my whole life." Cindy demanded to know where they were, and Robert replied, near the overpass in the dam. And when she asked, why didn't you stay with them? He said they were already dead. Cindy was beyond hysterical at this point, but jumped in her car, demanding Robert get in with her and tell her exactly where the car and her boys were. She floored it to the scene, hysterical, trying to get directions from a reluctant Robert, and when she finally arrived at the spot, she jumped out and bolted to where she thought they might be, where the car might have gone through the fence, but she couldn't see anything in the pitch black. Meanwhile, Stephen, who Cindy had called in hysterics as she drove to the dam, had followed them and saw Cindy frantically running into the darkness. Now, he noted the time to be 7:49 p.m. By this stage, Cindy's phone had picked up reception and she called 000, telling the operator her ex-husband had crashed the car with their kids into a dam, but now they can't find it. As they waited, Robert again repeated to Stephen that the boys were in the water and he had a coughing fit and blacked out, only to wake up in the water. Stephen recalled how frustrating the conversation was, and he had lost his temper with Robert telling him to get out of his fucking face. So Shane followed Cindy, Robert and Stephen to the dam in his car and parked his car, leaving his headlights on so the headlights would light up the dam. And Stephen used these lights to help guide him as he waded into the black freezing water. Tony jumped into, but only to his ankles, pointing Stephen to anything in the blackness that resembled a car. So Tony was helping guide Stephen to anything that was possibly the car. Now, Stephen's hands were starting to lose feeling and his legs soon followed. We are still cold in September. September is still a very cold month here in Australia, especially in Victoria. So Stephen's hands were starting to lose feeling thanks to the freezing cold water, and his legs soon follow, and he knew he was in danger of developing hypothermia, but he made himself dive in one more time, the sounds of the distant sirens and the freezing cold dragging him back to the river, to the bank of the dam. The first ambulance arrived at 8:07 p.m, followed quickly by police, and they quickly told the men in the water to get out due to the risk of hypothermia, and they told a devastated Cindy that they dare say the rescue effort would now be a recovery effort. Police and police divers returned to the scene the following morning and they found the car. Inside the car was Jai, 10, Tyler, 7 and Bailey, 2. All the boys were unrestrained, and heartbreakingly, police think Jai might have tried to get his brothers out of the car before they all died. At the news, Cindy had to be sedated and spent several days in hospital while Robert stood by his coughing fit story. And Cindy's family supported him, telling the media he was a wonderful father and the whole thing was just a tragic accident. Cindy's whole world was gone in an instant. She would never see her beautiful boys again. And as she grieved, a devastated community asked why. But behind the scenes, police were quickly trying to debunk Robert's claims of coming off the road of his coughing fit. And they had serious doubts about his version of events. And they set about trying to debunk them. Now, police testing showed that if Robert had indeed had a coughing fit and blacked out, the car wouldn't have ended up where it did. There were no tyre marks, no skid marks to indicate he'd hit the brakes, and a test on the steering of the car and the path the car had driven to end up in the dam had a tree in the middle of it. So when he's driven off the road, if he was unconscious, he would have driven straight into that tree because it was in the middle of the path. If he was conscious, he would have swerved to avoid it. Interestingly enough, the headlights were also off as well as the heater. Robert told police that when he came to, Jai opened the car door trying to get out, which made the car fill with water and tip forward. So he closed the door and tried to get them out another way. Now, police testing confirmed that at the depth Robert claimed, so the depth of water Robert claimed the car had landed in, if a car door was opened, the car would have tipped sideways, not forward. This, plus an eyewitness who later came forward saying she had driven behind a car just like Robert's with 3 little people crammed into the back seat, was driving erratically and swerving all over the road, making her think that perhaps they were looking for foxes. Now, this just added to the growing suspicions of the police officers. Meanwhile, while they were investigating Robert played the role of the grieving father at the funeral of his young sons, holding a weak and devastated Cindy as the 3 little coffins of their sons stood before them. Not long after this, though, police moved in and arrested Robert for the murder of his 3 sons. Robert maintained his innocence and was ordered to stand trial. Now, police alleged that Robert murdered his sons to get back at Cindy for ending the marriage, and for reasons I couldn't find, he was released on bail and then called to stand trial on the 21st of August 2007. So he was arrested, released on bail, and then ordered to stand trial. Now, at this stage, Cindy backed Robert, telling the court, "I believe with all my heart that this was just an accident and that he would not have hurt a hair on their heads. I don't believe this is murder." Now, as the murder trial progressed, which started in August 2007, the court heard that 3 months before the children's deaths, Robert told a friend by the name of Greg King that he had plans to kill the children so Cindy would suffer every Father's Day for the rest of her life, along with his plan to take away the most important things to her. Now, Greg didn't tell authorities because he simply thought his friend was, quote, bullshitting. Now, police forensic experts stated that the way the car veered off the road, even if Robert had had a coughing fit and blacked out, and the fact that it missed the tree and the fact that the headlights were off were all telling, and a sleep specialist and associate professor told the court it was highly unlikely that Robert had a coughing fit, and that a coughing fit to the point of blacking out was a rare condition called cough syncope, something Robert just didn't have. Robert stood by his testimony that he did indeed have a coughing fit and blacked out, and when he came to, the car was in the dam and Jai was trying to free himself, saying, "Dad, we're in water." Robert told the court he told his son to sit there and not panic, and was about to get out of the car himself when the car started filling with water when Jai opened the door in his attempt to get out. Robert said he shut the door and got out himself to try and find another way to get his boys out, but the car started going down like it was rocking on a ledge, and then suddenly it just nosedived. He also told the court, "I'd do anything to have them back, and I've got to live with this for the rest of my life, that I couldn't save my kids." On October 5th, 2007, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury found Robert guilty of murder, and the court erupted, and Cindy broke down and her mother collapsed and she had to be taken to hospital. Now, on the 16th of November 2007, Robert was sentenced to 3 life sentences with no parole. He immediately announced his intentions to appeal this decision. Now, in December of 2009, Robert's conviction was overturned by 3 appeal judges, with reasons being they were critical of the original trial judge, the evidence given, and the evidence of key witness Greg King, the one who claimed Robert said to him he'd planned to kill his boys on Father's Day, and he was granted bail. Robert's retrial began on the 4th of May 2010, and the jury again deliberated for 3 days before returning their verdict. Guilty on all counts, and in October of that year, he was sentenced to life in jail with a 33-year minimum. Justice Lex Lasry, who oversaw the second trial, was scathing, telling Robert, "Your crimes have devastated a significant number of people. Primary among them is your ex-wife Cindy Gambino, the mother of these 3 children." Now, by this stage, Cindy had made a complete 180 in her assumption of Robert's innocence, and she stated in an interview she thought she was initially in denial, and that was her only way of surviving, that there is no possible way the father of my children could have done this. But after Robert refused to let her visit him in jail when he was first jailed, and his avoidance of her made her begin to change her mind. And after the second trial, she expressed her disappointment at his chance of parole, telling reporters, "It's a life sentence for me, it should be a life sentence for him." Robert was sent to protective custody in Victoria's Barwon prison to begin his sentence. Once he has served his 33-year minimum, he will be eligible for parole in 2043 or thereabouts. Now, in 2013, Robert launched another appeal for his murder charge, which was dismissed. And in 2015, Robert agreed to pay Cindy an undisclosed amount in compensation due to suffering, loss, and damage caused by her son's murders. Now, some happy news for Cindy. Her and Stephen were married, and the couple had 2 baby boys, 2 sons, and she described Stephen as the love of her life. She adored the life she had with Stephen and her boys, and she was immensely proud of her boys and their brotherly bond. She just adored them as she had done her other sons. Now, Cindy also found comfort and happiness in her new faith, which was Jehovah's Witness, and the family spent weekends rock climbing, fishing, or going to the movies. Cindy had at last found some happiness after such a horrific loss. Sadly, in 2022, just as Cindy finally found happiness, she passed away from a medical episode aged just 50. In death, as in life, Cindy was helping people as her organs were donated, and she saved the lives of 2 people. Cindy was laid to rest in Winchelsea Cemetery in the same plot right next to her precious boys. In 2024, Robert was stripped of control over the tombstones in which he owned of the 3 boys he had murdered. He also had his name, which had followed the sentence, "much loved and cherished children of," scrubbed off the boys' headstones. He also lost any right to be buried alongside the boys or Cindy when he dies. Now, Cindy's husband, Stephen, who was fighting this after Cindy had passed, told Australia's ABC, there's probably numerous families out there that have been fighting the system for 10, 20, 30, 40 years over monsters that have killed one of their family members or numerous family members that still have rights. It's a remarkable feeling to know that you've been part of changing history. Robert has his supporters who believe he is innocent, still to this day. And in 2024, Robert took advantage of a new Victorian law and planned to launch a new appeal against his conviction. But as of now, from what I could find, it is not clear, nor has it been reported if he has successfully appealed or if he has lodged an appeal. As it stands, he is currently serving his life sentence in jail for murdering his 3 sons. And as it stands, as of today, Robert Farquharson is still in jail serving his life sentence for murdering his 3 sons. And there we have it, guys. 3 beautiful innocent boys killed by the man who was supposed to love and protect them in a sick act of revenge and spite that the boys' families, friends and community will never ever recover from. It is beyond comprehension, really. And that's it, guys. Another episode of Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans done and dusted. Thank you for lending me your ears. You are all rock stars. And of course, you can subscribe. You can buy me a coffee. You can send me a text. You can find me on TikTok. I'm over there. There's plenty of ways you can get in contact with me if you feel the need. And please do. I do not bite. And until next time, guys, stay safe, stay cool, and stay caffeinated. I will catch you all later.